Good morning, everyone. It's time for another podcast edition. You're listening to Thinking Outside the Box podcast with yours truly, the Algo Capitalist, aka the Vulcan, coming to you live from PulseWaveTrading.com, home of the world famous PulseWave Price Trigger Reports. So, we're completed a Memorial Day holiday weekend. Hopefully, everyone had time to get back and relax and unwind from all of the foolishness that's been going on in the world. And something interesting I noted, and I've been watching, the cultural wars and things that have been transpiring over the last few weeks. And I realized that we are really definitely living in 1984. All the different key aspects of the book and the film that were, hit on has been manifesting itself in our present day reality. And it's mind blowing that you can put out information, you can give people truths and facts, and then they still will do the opposite. They'll still run into the brick wall. Doesn't matter how many forewarnings, forebodings, prophecies, doesn't matter, predictions, people still go down the wrong path, down the wrong way. And it's just shocking to see that that's a part of our human nature, and that is to rebel against any and everything. Just interesting. Now, one of these key aspects that I've noticed is the speak. And we have witnessed over the last few years the attack on free speech. And we've seen liberties vanishing from before our eyes. And speech is that last bastion to take away. Because once you take away free speech, everything else, the walls fall down all around that. Everything hinders on the free speech. Because if you're not able to come to the marketplace of ideas, then you don't really have a free society. Freedom of information, freedom of expression, losing the ability to express oneself, losing the ability to put down one's thoughts and ideas pen to paper. We're witnessing modern day Fahrenheit 451 book burning. No, we don't like these particular books. These books are dangerous. The ideas are dangerous. And when you hear people speak like that about ideas being dangerous, what they are really saying is that the ideas contained herein are dangerous to our narrative of control over society. If we allow these words to be read, to be heard, to be spoken unencumbered, then we will lose our grip on society. We will lose our control over the minds and the hearts of the people. And that should let you know just how weak, how tender the powers that be structure really is. If the structure was so sound and complete and impregnable, then they wouldn't be concerned about any narrative that goes against their narrative. They wouldn't be afraid of inquiry. They wouldn't be afraid if people questioned their motives and demanded to have, you know, open dialogue and, you know, full disclosure of all things. We've seen now something morph differently. What we're seeing is Instead of a government for the people, by the people, of the people, what you're seeing is an elite group that has elected themselves as your overseers, your overlords, your controllers. The highest seats in the land of government are all filled either by corporate interest and or some type of affiliation with secret societies. So secret societies are running the government. Secret societies are running the major corporations, and the major corporations have taken over the government. The secret societies have taken over the government. They rule and control all the offices of government. So when you have the secret societies controlling the world's largest and most powerful corporations and controlling the world governments, you have to start to wonder, what is the end game and how did this even come about? Well, it's taken a long time, centuries to be exact, for this plan to evolve and to take full root. And now the roots are so deep, it would be virtually impossible to root it all out or uproot it. The game is long in the tooth, and we're entering the final innings. And what you've begun to see is right in the people's face, not even blinking or not even blushing, just going straight for it. You see now the buildup of a separate government that is aside from the single governments of the world. So let's just say, for instance, we had 300 recognized nations or countries in the world, right? That means you have 300 different governments, 300 different societies, languages, cultures, backgrounds, belief systems, whatever. But then you have now another government forming that places itself over the sovereign governments of these sovereign 300 countries. So instead of the 300 countries being autonomous, now you have the emergence of a new government made up of unelected persons, some of which names people don't even know or not familiar with. And they've never held a political office or anything of that nature. And again, this is being allowed to happen right in front of the face of the people. You've had all these different committees, and it's very masterful how they form themselves. They say, oh, no, this is just a think tank. This is just a business meeting group where we all get together and just talk shop, i.e., the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, things of that nature, Council on Foreign Relations, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, World Health Organization. These are all so-called, you know, benevolent groups, think tank groups. We care about you groups. So nothing to see here. Just trust us. We have your best interests in heart. We're trying to bring peace and safety to the world. We want to feed all the hungry people. We want to provide medical services and medicines to the needy people. That's what we're here for. We want to help developing nations. We want to offer them, assistance so that they can become strong like we are. So they've been able to operate in the shadows and in certain instances right in front of the people's face under the auspices of, we are doing God's work. We are an angelic organization. We just came down from heaven. The Most High sent us, and now we are doing the work of God. And so we are altogether righteous, altogether holy, and altogether immutable. Therefore, you should not question us, you should not challenge us, and you should not even want to seek dialogue with us because no dialogue will be given. Do not question us. We are your authorities. We are your betters. We are above you. The laws we make to govern you have nothing to do with us. We don't have to abide by these laws because these laws are not for us. They're made for you, the peasantry. You are here to serve us. We are not here to serve you. That is the mentality. And as their organization has grown over the centuries, they have amassed great wealth and great power. They've created pseudo organizations, and their shell companies have shell companies that have shell companies that have shell companies. And they operate under all these different umbrellas and parachutes of different institutions and names, nonprofit organizations, you name it, 501c3, you name it, that's how they're coming. So they're able to do a lot. They own the police departments, they own the government agencies, they own the treasury, they own the military, they own everything and control everything with absolute power. And they've been able to do this in the shadows because they've placed their people in these key positions and key roles so that on the surface, they take on the shape-shifting qualities of the guy next door, the lady next door. So you gravitate toward them. They resonate with you. You know Joe Plumber. This is Joe Plumber. And so in doing so, they're able to install themselves lifelong into positions of power. So you'll have a congressperson, a senator, a governor, a mayor, whatever, and they'll be in those positions forever. They're called career politicians. They've been installed because they do the people's bidding behind the scenes. They're masters, they're overlords, they're part of the cabal, they're part of the secret society. They control and rule and reign supremely. And even though they make you think you have choice, the reality is they go unchallenged. People talk, people create grassroots movements of rebellion. Remember the Tea Party? Well, look how soon that fizzled out when the secret societies infiltrated that organization and then took it over from the inside. That is extreme power where you're able to take over grassroots organizations and movements. And then they took a step further. They said, okay, we see that the people are restless. So we're going to give them. They want rebellion, they want grassroots uprisings and organizations, then that's exactly what we'll give them. So then they create Black Lives Matter. They create Antifa. And to keep people scared and afraid and shook, they also control the organizations at the street level. They control all the gangs of the world, every single last one of them, all done through the secret societies. If you doubt this, just take a cursory glance at your local street gangs. Look at their hand signs and hand signals. Notice that the hand signs and hand signals are very similar to that of the secret societies. Look at the colors. Very key colors that are the same identical ones as the secret societies. Anyone that is in a position of authority and power has been placed there. I think a very good movie that explains this and shows it very well. It's an old movie, if you can find it. It's called Brotherhood of the Bell. And one of the quotes I like in the movie, one of the scenes toward the end of the movie, when they have a come to Jesus moment with the main character, and they're like, "I assure you, you never competed for anything in your life." He's like, I got here because of my hard work and and my education and my fortitude, my tenacity. And it was like, I guarantee. They say, we assure you, you have never competed for anything a day in your life. Well, my father built his company from the ground up with his bare hands. And they said, we assure you, your father has never done any of the things you just said. I watched my father go to work and work those hours. And then they said, we guarantee you, things are not as what you think. Your father did not have to work hard. But I saw him. Yes, I know you saw him. But how do you think he got those government contracts? How do you think he got these licenses and these abilities and this door open and that window open for him? They said, we made it happen. We did it. Yeah. I won't spoil all the tenets of the movie for you, but just if you can find it, check out Brotherhood of the Bell. I think that movie sums it up very well. It's a very old movie, but it's timeless. It explains exactly how they work. There were some other movies I had watched over the years too that did a really good job explaining some things. I even watched some bad movies that were horrible. But have you ever noticed that you may watch a bad movie, but in the entire movie it sucks, right? But they don't have this one scene or this one dialogue portion that will be like, what? Hmm? Well, there was a moment like that. What movie was it? I think it was from the Left Behind series, and I forget which installment, which part it was. It was there's been variations of the Left Behind thing. There's been like all these different remakes and copies and copycats, but there was this one I saw, and I thought that they really explained. It came out of nowhere, and it showed you that it was the banking cabal that was the real superpower in the nations in the world for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. And then when the Antichrist came, he wiped all of them out. He killed every single last one of them. And he was like, I'm here now. I'll take control. Thank you very much for what you've done in serving me, whether you knew it or not. But yeah, you were serving me and my purposes. And now I'll take it from here. And then he killed every single last one of them. So the central bank heads were all done. They were out of here. So I thought that was really powerful how they showed that, how they broke that down. So that's where we are. And now because they control key areas of life, that means they have influence over every aspect of life. Case in point, they control the media. The media is not independent. The media gets its script, its talking points from the government. Always has been, always will be. All right. That's why they parrot the same thing. And it's funny because this part has been exposed on multiple occasions and people just laugh like, oh, that's funny. Like it never clicks in their brain. You're being played, you've been lied to. They led you to believe that the Democrats and the Republicans are two different parties that argue and bicker and hate one another. When in reality, behind closed doors, they agree on everything because they're put there to do the agenda of the secret societies that put them there in the first place. It's not multiple secret societies, it's only one. It's only one. And they're all connected to the one big umbrella, the big monster that controls all of it. Always remember that. The Democrats and the Republicans are the same party. The forces behind the scenes that got them all elected are the same people, the same secret society that rules and owns the world. So it's just theater for you. It's for your benefit to make you think you have choice, to make you think, hey, the Democrats are better than Republicans, Republicans are better than the Democrats. It's all political theater to keep you entertained and to trigger key emotional responses from you at certain times based on whatever political agenda they want to push at the moment. Remember, everything they do, they get you to agree with it and make you think it was really your idea and that they're doing this for your benefit. Multiple examples of that. So they're able to get people to believe whatever they want them to believe. As a matter of fact, everything that you know and have learned has been given to you by them. The public school system, owned and operated and controlled by them. So your entire educational system is from them. And when you went to university, who do you think controls and owns and operates the universities? They do. They do. And if you doubt that, just look at the introduction song to the TV show Weeds. The people in the ticky-tacky houses and the ticky-tacky boxes. The song is showing you in a humorous, comical way the way your society has been built and designed. And it is a system that has been in place and installed for a long time, and it's not ever going to stop because it serves a very key purpose. So you think you're getting quote unquote higher education, but you're really not. No. And you may think, well, that's only for those, certain, you know, degrees like in humanities and things like that. I'm a doctor, I'm a surgeon, I'm a lawyer. Yes, but you still got your belief structure from them. They own all the medical schools. Their pharmaceutical industrial complex owns all the medical schools. They own, operate, and fund all the medical schools. So they're giving you their doctrine, indoctrination about medicine, their theories about medicine to the point where you don't even question it. You can't break from your programming. So when you go into private practice, everything that you've learned aside from the actual physical part of your practice, you got from them. And there have been incredible documentaries done over the years exposing that, showing you the difference in how the medical schools evolved over the last several decades, and how at one point you learned things a different way than you learn them today. There's a reason why when you're in medical school, you maybe get 5 minutes of a course on diet. There's a reason for that. There's a reason they teach you that the body cannot heal itself anymore. It needs synthetic medications to do that. It needs help. They didn't used to teach that, but they teach that now. Everything that you have been taught has been given to you by them. And it's only until you're able to break your programming that you can see clearly. Right now, the world has believed and is believing another lie. They lie to you about everything. Right now, they're lying to you about none other than the debt ceiling. So the debt ceiling fiasco continues. Negotiations over increasing the federal debt ceiling continues ad nauseum in Washington, as has occurred several times over the past 20 years. Both Republicans and Democrats are presently using increases in the debt ceiling as a bargaining chip in negotiating how federal tax dollars will be spent. Now, again, most of this is theater for your benefit. We know how these negotiations always end, right? The debt ceiling is always increased. Massive amounts of new federal debt are incurred, and federal spending continues its upward spiral. In fact, since the last time we endured a major debate over the debt ceiling back in 2013, the national debt has nearly doubled, soaring from $16.7 trillion 10 years ago to $32 trillion in 2023. Now, over the same period, federal spending has increased more than 80% from 3.4 trillion in fiscal year 2013 to 6.2 trillion in fiscal year 2022. So here we are again, with policymakers essentially discussing how long it will take for the national debt and federal budget to double again. As far as Washington is concerned, that's all fine. Nothing to see here. The debt ceiling will rise sizably. We know this because what really matters as far as DC policymakers are concerned is that the taxpayer gravy train never stops. Equally important is that federal government not default on any of its massive debt to ensure continued access to cheap debt, and thus massive amounts of deficit spending, both now and forever. To take this narrative at face value, however, we have to buy into some big myths that policymakers are quite enthusiastic about repeating. These lies persist because the regime needs to convince the voters and the taxpayers that no matter what happens, no major changes to the tax and spend status quo can ever be allowed to occur. The first myth is that the Republicans want austerity. In Washington, when policies use the word cut, they usually are talking about small reductions in the rate of the increase in spending. Now, for example, if Pentagon spending has been increasing at 2% per year, which was indeed the case for the past decade, then an increase next year of 1.5% will be denounced by some as a cut. In reality, it's not a cut at all, of course. Spending has increased, but in the minds of Washington policymakers, taxpayer money is rightfully theirs. So any slowdown in the flow of free money is branded as a cut. That's the basic premise of what we're seeing now when advocates of limitless increases of the debt ceiling bemoan cuts to Social Security or any other welfare program. In the current debate, the Republicans say they want less spending than last year for the 2023 fiscal year, and then a cap on spending at 1% increases in each year for the next 10 years. But before anyone claims that this is indeed some sort of meaningful cut, let's look at the federal outlays over the past 20 years. It tells a different story altogether. As some moderation in spending during the second Obama term, spending again accelerated during the Trump years as it then surged to a new high and it just went off the charts. But as Trump doubled down on massive spending increases during the COVID panic, naturally this surge continued during the Biden years, and spending now remains well above trend. Indeed, to bring spending back to the pre-2019 trend would require massive budget cuts totaling more than $1 trillion to the annual budget. That's certainly not in the cards right now. Rather, the Republicans are seeking a tiny reduction in spending from the CBO 2023 estimate of $6.4 trillion down to slightly below 2022 spending of $6.27 trillion. Even with this slowdown, there is no danger of the 5-year moving average falling below where it was in 2022. According to the GOP plan, however, after the proposed minuscule reduction for 2022, it's back to annual increases of 1%. But it's important to remember that this cap on annual increases to 1% is in no way binding on future Congress. Congress can and will, if history is any guide, forget all about any previous agreement and increase spending to meet perceived needs at any time. Rather, the cuts we keep hearing about, even if the GOP is successful, are likely to look like the so-called sequestration we kept hearing about back in 2013 that was supposed to usher in an age of austerity. Instead, federal spending and debt has nearly doubled in the decades since. In other words, any claim that Republicans want to cut spending is true in only the most narrow, short term sense of the word. Spending remains and will likely continue to remain far above even Trump's huge, at the time, 2019 budget increases. The post COVID mega spending isn't going away, especially not anytime soon. Again, it is a myth that they have been pushing and they want you to digest it. It's political theater. What about the second myth? Well, that myth is called the U.S. has never defaulted. That's what they want you to believe. Central to the debt ceiling and budget debate, though, is the often repeated claim that negotiations must be concluded immediately to ensure that the U.S. does not miss payments on any of its debts. After all, we are told the U.S. has never missed a payment. This is an out and out lie. The U.S. has absolutely, indisputably defaulted before. This began in the wake of the American Revolution when the U.S. defaulted on domestic loans. After the new Constitution was in place in 1790, the federal government renegotiated past debts at less favorable terms for investors. That's what we call default, ladies and gentlemen. Then there was the greenback default of 1862. The original greenbacks were $60 million in demand notes, which were redeemable in specie less than 5 months later. In January of 1862, the U.S. Treasury defaulted on these notes by failing to redeem them on demand. Perhaps the most egregious case was the Liberty Bond default of 1934. The U.S. was contractually obligated to pay back its debts on these bonds in gold. Franklin Roosevelt decided to default on the whole of the domestically held debt by refusing to redeem in gold to Americans and devaluing the dollar by 40% against foreign exchange. The U.S. refused to make good on its end of these bond contracts. Ladies and gentlemen, that was also a default. Then there was the short default of 1977. As Jason Zweig noted in 2011, in April and May of 1979, amid computer malfunctions, heavy demand, and small investors, and in the wake of congressional debate over raising the debt ceiling, the U.S. failed to make timely payments on some $122 million in Treasury bills. The Treasury characterized the problem as a delay rather than as a default. While the error affected only a fraction of 1% of the U.S. debt, short-term interest rates, then around 9%, jumped 0.6 percentage points, and the U.S. was promptly sued by bondholders for breach of contract. In a court of law, ladies and gentlemen, that is viewed as a default. So the next time Joe Biden or Janet Yellen go on television to insist the U.S. has never defaulted, know that you are being lied to yet again. How many lies are they going to continue to throw at the American people, hoping that you are ignorant to the contrary? The last lie about this debt ceiling thing is that the default is the end of the world. Any talk of default is sure to bring predictions of economic devastation. Those who have lived through a financial crisis or two will know how this works. As soon as signs of trouble in the economy appear, the regime lines up experts to tell us that unless the government is empowered to spend endlessly on bailouts and stimulus, then the economy will collapse, unemployment will surge, and hell on earth will ensure. But hold on. I thought they said they need unemployment to surge in order to tackle hyperinflation. See, the taxpayers certainly heard this repeatedly in 2008 and in 2009 as the regime insisted it must be free to hand over trillions of dollars in bailout funds to wealthy bankers, not you, the citizen, but wealthy bankers and automakers and financiers. We were told that the central bank must be able to print up trillions of dollars so as to buy up government bonds and mortgage backed securities to pad the balance sheets of the investor class, not you, the peasantry. We were told this would fix the economy. Another lie. Naturally, when the recession turned out to be the worst since 1982, the so called experts then said, without any evidence whatsoever, things would have been worse without all their bailouts. We're hearing the same thing now about possible default on the $32 trillion national debt. Give us new debt ceiling increases with no strings attached appears to be the constant refrain. Without this cartel spitting out all this foolishness, they want you to believe that without this carte blanche, we are told there will be economic catastrophe. But it's all the same scare tactics the regime trouts out every time it wants a new series of bailouts or immense amounts of new spending. Trump hysterically said the same thing when he demanded passage of the $2.2 trillion COVID rescue plan. We're told there is no alternative and any opposition is reckless. Again, don't question us, just do what we say. Rather, we must approve any and all new spending now and deal with the consequences later. Let's kick the can down the road some more. Why not, right? But later never comes because the strategy is always to just kick the can further and further down the road. To not do so, the experts insist, will destroy the economy. Well, the time has come to start doubting this narrative and demand that the federal government start being more honest and transparent about its runaway and unpayable debt. And yes, today's massive federal debt is unpayable. It's not even manageable. For an example of how it is unmanageable, just look at how interest on the debt is gradually consuming all other federal spending. With interest rates rising, debt service is ballooning. According to an analysis from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, net interest will surpass defense spending by 2028, Medicare spending by 2044, and Social Security spending by 2050, becoming the largest single line item in the budget. Now, by 2053, net interest will consume approximately 7.2% of GDP, with nearly 40% of federal revenues. It's clear at this point that the only strategy the federal government, the Federal Reserve, have for dealing with this is to inflate away the dollar with easy money so as to bring interest rates back down and pay back the debt in a devalued dollar. Paying back debts with devalued dollars is a type of default. But this method helps hide the fact. Make no mistake, when the US government chooses to manage its debts by inflating away the dollar, it is defaulting. A more honest and rational approach would be to explicitly default, rather than trying to dishonestly inflate away the debt obligation. A less deceptive federal government would simply admit that it can only afford to pay back its debt at some reduced amount, say 90 cents on the dollar or less. Naturally, this would cause interest rates to surge, as has occurred in the past when the U.S. has defaulted. This, however, would simply be the process of bringing interest rates more in line with the real risks that go with investing in government debt. Now, see, you've been programmed to think that Investing in government debt is 100% safe guaranteed. There's no such thing as a 100% safe guaranteed investment, people. Anyone who says otherwise is lying to you. The current political status quo, however, is built around protecting investors rather than the taxpayers who ultimately pay all the bills from risk. This method of turning debt into inflation is attractive to governments and their Wall Street enablers because it shifts the burden of runaway spending to ordinary savers and consumers, i.e., the peasantry. They are the ones who pay the real price of de facto inflationary default through price inflation, unaffordable homes, stagflation, and falling real wages. When the experts who oppose any sort of explicit default insist that default would bring disaster, what they really mean is that it would bring disaster for their friends on Wall Street and in the government. The experts prefer the status quo, which is a slow motion inflationary disaster that's playing out in the household budgets of ordinary Americans right now. So, just something to think about. Like I said, you're being lied to about just about everything in your current reality. And this is just one more thing, the debt ceiling. So just something to chew on and think about as we go about our day and this process. Just know that's political theater and it's there for your benefit, not theirs. All right. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already to be kept abreast when I go live. It's not a schedule thing where I do it every day or whatever. It's just when I get time enough to do it. So hopefully you got something out of this. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.